Welcome to this episode of Conversations with Great Thinkers, the podcast where we explore the ideas, experiences, and philosophies of some of the most influential minds of our time. I'm your host, Jim Lanchi, and today we're diving into a conversation that is as timely as it is thought provoking. Our guest today is a man whose life has been defined by service to his country, his faith, and his deeply held principles. He's a retired United States Army Lieutenant Colonel, a former U.S. Congressman, and a fearless advocate for conservative values. He's also the author of Guardians of the Republic, an American Ronin's Journey of Faith, Family, and Freedom, a book that is part memoir, part political philosophy, and a fully unapologetic call to defend American values. Alan West has been a steadfast voice in the national conversation on faith, family, and freedom. From his upbringing in a military household to his leadership on the battlefield and in politics, his story is one of resilience, conviction, and courage. His views challenge a number of conventional narratives, but his willingness to speak bluntly has earned him both admiration and respect. Today, we're going beyond the headlines. We'll explore what shaped his worldview, his thoughts on the future of conservatism, and his reflections on faith, leadership, and the America he believes in. We'll ask the tough questions. How do conservative principles truly serve all Americans? What role should government play in solving systemic issues? And lastly, what lessons can we take from his journey? So whether you agree with him or not, I invite you to listen closely, to engage, to question, and to think critically, because that's what this podcast is all about. Meaningful conversations with great thinkers. Without further ado, let's welcome to the show Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. Colonel, how are you, sir?
I'm doing very well, sir. Thanks so much for having me. And what an incredible intro. I'm
Well,
humbled.
it's my privilege to be able to speak to you today. Let me start off with a question about your book entitled Guardian of the Republic, and you refer to yourself as an American Ronin. Could you elaborate on what the title means to you and how it reflects your personal philosophy?
Sure. When you understand the samurai code, and of course the Ronin was a samurai who had lost his master, and he still pledged the service of his sword to protecting the people. And I think that's kind of like what happened with me. Even though my father passed away very early in my life, I was just 25 years of age when he passed in 1986. I was a young Army first lieutenant. I still pledge my life to live according to the principles and values upon which he raised me. And he was a World War II veteran. My godfather was a Tuskegee Airman by the name of William Sticky Jackson, his best friend. So, those things continue on in your life. And so I saw myself as this American Ronin, even though your quote unquote, your master, your role model, the person that you honored in life, and that was my dad for me, had passed away early on. I still continued on with the path and again with those things that he had inculcated in me.
Impressive. Can you tell us a little bit about how your own military experience shaped your perspective on America's role in the world, particularly regarding perhaps foreign policy and national security?
Well, I'll tell you, I came in, I was commissioned in 1982, and I will never forget as long as I live the very first time that we were up there. I was in an airborne unit stationed in Italy, Vicenza, Italy, and we had this rotation where we would bring down the Berlin Brigade, and this was a time when the wall was still up, and they would go through our cold weather training up in the Italian Dolomites, the Alps, and then we go up and do their urban operations, military operations in urban terrain, which is this incredible mock city that they have built up there to help them train and prepare. And so while you're up there in West Berlin, you get the opportunity one day to put on that, your dress green uniform at the time, spit shine jump boots, and your maroon paratrooper beret, and you got on the bus and you went through Checkpoint Charlie. And a lot of people don't recall Checkpoint Charlie, but that's when you left liberty and freedom and you went on the other side to East Berlin. And what I saw there in East Berlin, when I saw the despair, the despondency, when I saw there were very ugly cars. There were two types, two door and four door, and I believe like three or four different colors. The potholes in the streets, and the emptiness of the shelves, and I saw and understood that this is what I'm supposed to be standing on freedom's ramparts to make sure it doesn't come into my country. It does not affect the people that are our allies. And so that really, because of my bachelor's degree was in political science from the University of Tennessee, but now I got a chance to see it. I got a chance to see what this other ideology was, this other philosophy of governance was about centralized governmental control, communism, socialism, Marxism. And I decided I did not want to have any part of that. And it made me just, want to delve more into understanding constitutionalism, constitutional conservatism, real and true liberalism based upon John Locke and his two treatises of governments, natural rights theory, as opposed to what I saw there as a young man back in 1985.
You've certainly touched on a lot of issues that resonate with some of the questions I'd like to ask you a little later in this
Mm-hmm.
interview, but I'm going to take you backward just a little bit because I want to continue to create the foundation for who you are and what you believe. And in your book, you emphasize the importance of faith, family, and freedom.
Mm-hmm.
In today's increasingly secular culture, how do you believe, for example, that faith can still play a guiding role in governance?
Well, I will tell you that Second Corinthians chapter 3, verse 17 says that the Lord is a spirit, and where the spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And when you look at that quote from Alexander Fraser Tytler, where he talks about the cycle of democracies, he says that the thing that transitions people out of bondage is spiritual faith, and spiritual faith leads to courage. That's what I see as part of the cycle of the United States of America. How was it that 13 little ragtag colonies, and actually just one little colony, Massachusetts, and the Sons of Liberty, could take on the greatest military power that the world knew at the time, 250 years ago? So I think that, your faith in saying that Lord sets us free, then we should be free indeed in all aspects of our lives. And I think that, having studied political science, that's exactly what John Locke was talking about when he brought about natural rights theory that your rights do not come from man, do not come from government. It is just natural that they life, liberty, and property. Of course, that's what he quoted. Thomas Jefferson changed to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But even Jefferson quoted him talking about the laws of nature and nature's God in the document that established the United States of America. That's the Declaration of Independence. And so that makes America unique, because tell me any other country where the rights of the individual are defined in our establishing document as being inherent to you or endowed to you by the Creator God, the Judeo Christian faith heritage God. So, this whole secular humanism thing is very dangerous, because basically what it says is, forget that God thing, forget that inalienable rights thing. We, man, government, which is made up of men and women, we're the ones that determine your life, your liberty, your property, your pursuit of happiness, your buy and your leave. And so when you look at some of the grievances that Jefferson talked about in the Declaration of Independence, a lot of those grievances, a lot of those things, usurpations of individual rights, freedoms, and liberties, are happening today.
Your answer makes me want to pursue that a little deeper, but in a slightly different vein, because
Hmm.
you're talking about values, essentially.
Hmm.
And your
Yes.
book argues that conservative principles align deeply with historical values of the black community. But because historically black voters have leaned Democratic, why do you think there's a gap between ideology and voting patterns?
Well, I think that I wouldn't say historically, because if you go back and historically you look and study that the very first members of the United States House and Senate were black Republicans. I was the second black Republican from the state of Florida. The very first one was Josiah T. Walls, who served, I want to say, 1871 or so, 1873 to about 1876. So that relationship was there. But what happened was with the New Deal of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, put a chicken in every pot. And then, of course, the big thing was the Great Society programs of Lyndon Baines Johnson, which, the welfare nanny state came in, and what you saw from that point on, middle '60s, and so was the decimation of those principles and values in the black community: individual responsibility, accountability, family. All of a sudden, you broke down the family, and even a liberal Democrat New York senator by the name of Daniel Patrick Moynihan wrote against some of the policies that Johnson was bringing about and said how in the long run it would have a detrimental effect against the black family, and it absolutely has. I mean, when you look at the lack of fathers in the black community, but what you did was you created a dependency society. You think about Booker T. Washington and his principles upon which he established Tuskegee Normal Industrial Institute was education, entrepreneurship, and self-reliance. Those are conservative principles and values. You think about Frederick Douglass. These were men that were born into slavery, but they stood for the principles and values of individual economic empowerment, even in some of the darkest times and darkest days here in America for blacks. So I think it's so important, and I think that in this last election cycle, we're starting to see people wanting to go back to those principles and values and reestablish them in the community because they kind of realize they've been sold a bad bill of goods. So it's not something that has been historic, but it is something that has been monumental, and it is something that has really taken root over the last 50 to 60 years, and it's had a horrible effect on the black community and our urban centers.
It, Perhaps in the same context, if I may, in addition to yourself, who else do you see as positive role models? And maybe what leadership do you believe is still missing?
Well, I can tell you who I don't see is those positive role models. I mean, people like an Al Sharpton and, all the litany of people that are, brought out on some of these leftist news media outlets. But you're starting to see more black conservative voices take root. And again, I go back and think about Herman Cain, and Herman Cain and I shared something. We were both from Atlanta and both went to inner city high schools there. I mean, what a great role model. You think about someone like a Star Parker, who has started the Center for Urban Renewal, Cure, and look at her background and her story. So you're starting to see these individuals. I mean, Byron Donalds, who is carrying on down there and is going to be running for governor of Florida. So you're starting to see more individuals that are stepping up and being these voices. And the thing that I like is a lot of them are young uh, people of color and minorities that are stepping up, not just in the black community, but also in the Hispanic community as well. So I believe that we're starting to go back and say we want to reconnect with those principles and values. We don't want to be told that we have to be a victim all the time because I always have taught people, my troops and my daughters and my grandsons, when they grow up, I'll tell them the same thing. In life, you have two choices. You can choose to be a victor, or you can choose to be a victim. And there are always people out there that want to make you a victim because then you are belongs to them. You're subservient to them. You're subject to them. That's not the nature of America. That's not the nature of what I grew up in the black community. And sir, you're talking to a guy that was born in a segregated hospital in 1961 in Atlanta, Georgia. But I grew up in a great neighborhood, the neighborhood that produced Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I had that traditional nuclear black family. I had all the ingredients of success, and that's why I am where I am today.
I am grateful to you for mentioning Herman Cain. I had
Mm.
the opportunity to live in Atlanta, actually Sandy Springs on the Chattahoochee for
Oh,
a few
sure.
years, and I met Herman Cain on a number of occasions. He was
Hmm.
truly one of a kind, a remarkable man, just great to be with.
Well, I will show you something, and your viewers can see this. Um, this is a note
That's
from
great.
Herman
Yeah,
Cain.
yeah.
I hosted him in my house, and sadly, this was 2 weeks before he passed away. But I will never forget, having Herman Cain in my house and hosting him here. And the interesting thing that when my wife was a business professor, she was marketing and finance professor at Kansas State University.
Mm.
She arranged for Herman Cain to come
Oh, really?
speak there
Yeah.
at Kansas State University. So of course he immediately recognized and remembered
Mm.
her.
Yeah, he was almost a Zig Ziglar-like figure, if you're familiar with
Yes.
Zig Ziglar. So,
Oh, I am.
yeah. Let me ask if we can go in again a slightly different direction. But
Sure.
throughout your book, you warn against the dangers of big government. And again, I want to give you a moment to pause and reflect. But what is your assessment of the current trends in the Republican Party and the direction that it's going?
I think that the Republican Party is being challenged, and there are some people within the Republican Party. I'll put it this way: being a progressive has nothing to do with R&D. It has everything to do with whether or not you believe that the individual is subservient to government. And you have many of people up there in Washington D.C. and also in some of our state capitals and even local governments that believe in such. And I believe that trend is really being shaken, and that foundation has a crack in it. And so I see a Republican Party that it's not so much about party, it's about people's looking at their lives and saying, the principles and values that I thought I believed in all these years, I don't now. And it's a clear delineation. And it comes back, like I said, to do you believe, as Jefferson laid out in the Declaration of Independence, that the individual is sovereign over government here in the United States of America? And the individual is sovereign because their rights come from a sovereign God. Or do you believe that the individual is subservient to government? Remember that Jefferson talked about government exists based upon the consent of the governed. We have gotten so far away from that and understanding that, but I see more people going back, reading and connecting with our founding documents and questioning things and saying, I don't like that direction. And I believe that there's a great opportunity for the Republican Party to once again reestablish itself as the party of America, because that is what values and principles are all about, as opposed to some of the really absurd, asinine things that the Democrat Party has trended to, because again, it's a progressive, socialist, Marxist, almost communist type of perspective. And what's so funny to me is that I remember once upon a time there was a Democrat president by the name of Bill Clinton that said in his State of the Union address, the era of big government is over. But I mean, if he were to try to say something like that today, which I doubt he would, he'd be tarred and feathered and run away. So I think that what you see happening now, is a philosophical separation. It is a principle separation. It's a value separation. It is not just about two political parties.
I know that you've already been kind enough to touch on progressivism, but in Guardian of the Republic, you do critique progressivism as being really harmful to American values, at least as I understand what you've written. Are there any other arguments that you want to sketch out for our listeners in
Well,
support?
it's very good
Mm,
because the left has always been quite adept at taking language that seems very attractive,
mm,
and so when you say being a progressive, well, who would not want to be a progressive? What's the opposite of progressive? Being a regressive. Well, I don't want to be regressive. But really, that was the mentality of the the European, communists who wanted to bring this philosophy to the United States of America and say, well, we can't just come out and tell people we're communists. Well, let's say we're progressive. And so when you go back and you look at the very first progressive presidential administration this country saw, and that was Woodrow Wilson, we're still dealing with a lot of things that came out of the Wilson administration today because we thought it would be absolutely fine. I mean, consider this. I mean, once upon a time, we didn't have an personal income tax in the United States of America. Everything was a consumption based tax. And all of a sudden, we create this thing called an income tax. We say it's going to be temporary. We say it's not going to go above maybe 6 to 8%. Now, look at where the personal income tax is. And so, even here in a state like Texas, which everyone says is this great, bastion of conservatism, we tax people on their property. Well, that's a complete violation of John Locke and his natural rights theory. He said, because you're inalienable rights of life, liberty, and property. Why would you want to tax people's property? So, even here in Texas, if you pay off your home, pay off the land, you still have to pay the government, a property tax, or else guess what? They come in and they take it away from you. So basically, you're renting your property away from, the state of Texas. So again, we have had Republican governors, a Republican House, a Republican Senate. People keep saying, let's get rid of the property tax, let's go to something different. It's still there. So that's why I say that this progressivism issue is not about a political party. It's about the relationship between the individual and the institution of government.
Yeah. In response to your comment, as someone who also lives in Texas, I can tell you that since I just received my assessment for
Yeah,
tax, but that rent just went up considerably.
yeah.
Um, Sir, you served in Congress, and I think it's safe to say when you were there, it was somewhat divisive, but perhaps it's even more divisive now. So my
Far more.
question is, yeah, do you think that bipartisanship is still possible, or is the divide simply too deep?
No, I think that the chasm has grown far, wide, deep, or whatever you want to call it, because we're talking about two different philosophies of governance. And if you just go and recall the President Trump's recent address to the joint session of Congress, that shows you how deep, far, and wide this chasm is. It's not just about the policy differences. You can differ on the economy and things of this nature, but it's a visceral hatred that is out there right now. I was in the Congressional Prayer Caucus, and we had Democrat members, and we would sit down and do our Bible study and things of this nature. Uh, I don't know if that's something that is happening right now. You don't have those conservative Democrats, the blue dog Democrats, and I saw many of those individuals get run away. Dan Bourne of Oklahoma, Heath Schuler from North Carolina, who was a former University of Tennessee quarterback, Sylvester Reyes from El Paso. He was replaced by Robert Francis O'Rourke, known by the fake Hispanic nickname of Beto. And so this is what I've seen happen on the other side with the Democrat Party, and that's why this chasm has opened up so much. But even still here on the Republican side, what I see happening are more veterans running. I mean, I believe you have about 5 or 6 Navy SEALs. I mean, all-time high members of Congress now. You have people that are more so of a conservative, or some people even call it the populism, as opposed to what we knew of a kind of a blue blood elitist GOP establishment, which is kind of the dying breed. And I think that's part of that transition, of that shift that you see in the Republican Party. So when you have people on the Democrat side who say that illegally coming into the United States of America is not a crime, that's Representative Jasmine Crockett, who is right here in Dallas. Uh, I don't know if you can have bipartisanship with someone like that.
Yeah. I, I'm going to ask if you can draw on one of your own personal experiences, but you mentioned that leaders must be willing to stand firm even when it's unpopular. Are there any moments from your career, whether in Congress or out of Congress, when you took a stand that cost you politically but was the right decision?
Well, I mean, I only served one term in Congress, and I think it's because, not only did I challenge the Democrat Party, I challenged my own party. When, Speaker Boehner at the time said that, we had to get behind, President Obama and continue to provide resources and help the rebels in Libya. I said, sir, I mean, I don't think we should be helping these non-state, non-uniform belligerents there. And furthermore, I think that President Obama has, gone outside of his purview with the War Powers Act. And how funny it was that you had this staunch young conservative freshman member of Congress joining with Dennis Kucinich, who is, very to the left in the Democrat Party because of that issue there. And there were several other things that, I said that, I could not go along with. My yes is a yes, my no is a no. And the next thing you know, I mean, there were only two black Republican members of Congress at that time when I was there, 2011, 2013, Tim Scott and myself. Well, Republicans redistricted me out of the district that I won back for them. And it was a shock to so many people, to include Rush Limbaugh, who really went nuts because I was his congressional representative. Palm Beach Island was in the district that I represented. But my mom taught me something that, will always resonate with me. She said, a man must stand for something or else he'll fall for anything. And that's what you have to do. That's what you have to be. And some people will say, well, you're too intransigent. You're too highly principled. I said, well, weren't the founding fathers? I mean, is that what we want? I mean, we wouldn't have a country if they didn't stand up against what they saw was the perceived tyranny that Jefferson listed, and they were willing to fight the greatest power that the world knew at that time over that. So I think there are times, as William Barrett Travis did at the Alamo on the 5th of March, 1836, you got to draw a line in the sand.
Yeah, I don't want to go too far down memory lane because there are some things that I want to cover before our time is up. But anyone who was around at the time will recall that it was really remarkable that they used redistricting to influence or affect your election negatively. It was really quite something. Sir, going back to your book, which I really recommend that our listeners go back and look at it, it's extremely well written and really insightful. But if you could add one more chapter to your book today, given everything that's happening in America
Mm.
right now, what would it be about?
Um, Probably I would call it the third Great Awakening, because that's what I see happening. I mean, I have never seen a time in our history where people are really studying the Constitution. That's just such a beautiful thing, that folks are attuned to our rule of law, that people are challenging, and especially young people. I have the pleasure and honor of being one of the speakers for the Young Americas Foundation. As a matter of fact, I'll be heading out to Santa Barbara, California, out there at the Reagan Ranch Center to speak to middle and high schoolers. This is this is the dream. We have to be able to pass that torch of liberty and freedom on to that next generation. So I would probably write a chapter about the third great awakening and how we must make sure that we pass that torch of liberty on to subsequent generations.
How about the public figure or the public persona of Alan West? What do you think is the biggest misconception that people have about you, and what would you say to challenge that perception?
Well, my dad taught me you never read your own press and never drink your own tub water. So, I mean, I don't care. I mean, you really don't because look, the most important thing, and this again is something that I tried to teach, young soldiers and officers and my daughters, is that at the end of the day, you have to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and still recognize the person that you saw in the morning. That's the key. And so, I don't read the accolades. I don't read the detractions because I just want to stay true north. And the most important thing for me when it comes back to my faith, I want to hear one day after I pass through this life, I want to hear my Lord say, "Well done, thy good and faithful servant." That's
Well,
the most important thing for me.
those of us who have had the privilege of meeting you know that you're a man of tremendous faith. But if I can impose on you in one sentence, is there some way that you can define your ultimate mission in life?
My ultimate mission in life is to serve God and country, to be a good father, husband, granddad. That's it, and to leave a legacy of liberty and freedom. That to make sure that that's protected for my subsequent generation. When you become a grandparent, you understand it. It's different because really what you're looking at is your legacy in those grandkids. And so my oldest is three, my youngest grandson is one. Every moment that I'm with them, and it's just how can I impart something to them. Last night just sitting with my oldest grandson, and we got the old school abacus. I mean,
Yep.
I don't know if a lot of people that have that, but just sitting down there with him and counting from 1 to 100. That's what's so important, and being that positive male role model in his life so that he doesn't have to look anywhere else other than his dad and his granddad. So that would be it for me.
With you, he's going to have an extremely positive role model. And I can attest to everything you just said as the grandfather of 8 grandchildren, the oldest of whom is
Wow.
graduating from college, the youngest of whom is coming out of kindergarten this year. So,
Mm,
Colonel West, where can our listeners find more of your work and how can they get involved with the causes that you think are really
sure.
important?
Well, I'm the executive director of the American Constitutional Rights Union, and you can follow me there at theacru.org. I have a Substack page that you can follow. I have a podcast called Steadfast and Loyal. I'm the chairman of the Dallas County Republican Party, and you can check us out at dallasgop.org. And I'm out there on all the social media platforms except for that TikTok thing because I'm not supporting Communist China.
I, this is almost an impossible question to ask you with all that you've just shared with us, but what's next for you? Another book or political ambitions or something else? I hope the president has your phone number on speed dial.
Well, I don't know. Look, I live my life based upon Proverbs 3, 5 through 6. And it says, trust in the Lord with all thy heart. Lean not upon your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will guide your path. And so I just, again, want to be a humble servant to God and country. And I'll always be willing and able to answer that call.
Colonel West, I can't think of a better place to end this interview, but right here. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, Jim.